If you're just joining us, this is Upfront on the Voice of America. My name is Jackson Vonganyi with Laraamand Nyonton from Liberia. We're talking about President George Weah, some of the priorities, priority areas that he should look at, or he will be looking at, and as he starts his term in office. Let me ask you about education, because education is quite critical. The debate, obviously, around education reform in Africa has been beaten so many times. That horse has been beaten, but we don't see movement on that path as much as we should be seeing. Last year, I believe, or year before last, in the news around 2016, I believe, there was news that Liberia is privatizing its education. I have mixed feelings about that, given that one of the places that honestly, I was very impressed with Liberia. One of the things I was very impressed with, one day I'm walking down the street, okay, with my friends from Smart Liberia. Shout out to Smart Liberia. They took me to this place in the middle of the city, a convergence of about 4 buildings, and in a corridor, there was something called the Center for Intellectual Debate. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. The Center for Intellectual Debate.
I was very impressed. I was very moved. Okay. Yeah. This, I will put it up so that I put up a link, because I did give a little talk at that Center of Intellectual Debate.
All right.
Which, and in my speech to them, I talked about how, if you have people who are able to exchange ideas on this level, this is I guess a laboratory of indigenous knowledge, and that if you're able to talk like that, there's no need for civil war, because you're able to. And it was at a time when there was that I think a fight between the president and the Speaker of Parliament.
Oh, okay.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's very impressive.
As a matter of fact, I'm accredited international ambassador for CEO. We have helped CEO in a lot of different ways in the U.S. here, linking from connecting the grassroots ideas to some of the professional Liberians here who could help back home in expanding the program. We are glad that we continue to help in that direction. But speaking of education, I'm one who did not support the privatization of the educational system in Liberia. I feel and believe that the Partnership School Liberia program that led to the coming in of Bridge was a huge disaster. And the only success for that program in terms of measuring indicator is that it has managed to place millions and millions of dollars into the pocket of experts, as opposed to investing into the actual educational system. We still have the problem of unqualified teachers roaming around our classroom. We still have to harmonize our curriculum and ensure that students in public school are taking the same lesson as students in private school. We still have to ensure that we enforce regulation around the educational system to ensure that we can reduce the proliferation of schools in Liberia. Today, I can move from the United States and just open a school with all check and balance.
Without accreditation.
With accreditation, but it's very relaxed. It's not tightened. So there are many schools, even in neighborhoods, that schools should not even exist. So we have to strengthen all of that. I think the millions of dollars that was spent, whether it is directly from taxpayer money or it was from international aid, the millions of dollars that was spent to support Bridge in Liberia, which have made no impact, absolutely, could have been spent to train more teachers.
Bridge in Liberia is the company, the organization that took over from, basically took over the public school
privatization of the system. Yeah, so we would have the situation of this new government asking Nigeria, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, for 6,000 teachers as a startup, in cleaning the mess. So I think we have to revisit that entire aspect of it. Eliminate Bridge, eliminate the Partnership School Liberia program. We found a more vigorous way to engage the educational system. And one of my ideas is that we have to revolutionize the educational system. How do we do that? Take vocational and technical institution back into high schools. We had that in the 80s in the form of multilateral high schools, and it worked. So that students that are coming out of high school are coming prepared to engage the economy with skills.
They have some skills that they can start using without necessarily having to go on the streets. Because that's the other thing that I saw, and I was quite disappointed in. And it's not limited to Liberia. Is I saw these young people, many of them in their late teens, 20s, on the street, hawking goods. You know, hustle, the daily hustle, obviously. But they're making like 10 cents or 20 cents a day. And I'm like, you're at the peak, at the prime of your productivity, and you're making 10 cents, and you have so much land. Liberia is only 6 million people, 7 million people.
4.5 million.
See, I'm overestimating it. So you have a lot of land, which is very fertile. It's one of the most naturally gifted countries in the world, but you have kids in the most productive years of their life making 10 cents. And for me, that goes to education. If you're not giving your kids the right skills, the right tools, the right understanding of ways to solve problems, their local situation, then you're failing them.
Yeah, it goes back to education, but I think it also goes back to system failure. Let's not forget, Liberia is still nurturing, the 14 years of civil conflict. A lot of us were hurt. I was only like 3 years old when the war started. And by the time the war ended, 14 years later, I was 17 and just graduating from high school. But a lot of my peers did not have the time and the chance to go through the formal education, so they miss out on a whole lot. So there are three groups of young people we have to deal with in the current structure of the Liberian society. Those with the skills that are graduated from universities, that the economy ready to not want at the moment. We have to ensure that there is an intermediate program with the universities that the government can subsidize the university to have them going back. So let's take vocational, that's the technical skill back to the universities too as well, so that they can go through 6 to 9 months program and come out with the skill. Those without the skills that we see in BDOTC and NVTC and other vocational institutions, we have to close all of them, because what I see is that while we are actually tackling one problem, we are also seeing, as a result of solving that problem, seeing another problem. Take, for example, the Ministry of Youth and Sport has a lot of youth programs. They have the YES program. I was in charge of one of the programs at one point in time when I worked with the Mercy Corps International, and that was the National K-led program. All right, so you have that program where recent college graduates can go into line ministries and agency and work and acquire the kind of experience that can lead them to employment along those lines. All right, so you have a lot of different programs. But this program, at the center of this program, is lack of accountability. Okay, so we have to take all of these programs away from the Ministry of Youth and Sport if we are serious about dealing with youth issues. Take it away from the Ministry of Youth and Sport and invest that money into the educational system. A boom in terms of budgetary allocation for education. All right, at least we can reach at least the 25% mark in terms of our overall national spending on education as the global standard. We can begin to think about subsidizing private schools, which will offset, the rise in tuition and fee in every year. We can begin talking about tuition loan, like we have in the United States, student loan programs that allow people who are graduating from high school to ensure that they go to colleges and universities of their choice. Right now in Liberia, you have 82% of those young people that are graduating from high school never entering college. So they are stuck right in the middle. We have to get rid of that pool to allow more people to come. The third thing we can do, I think, in terms of education, is to make sure that we introduce STEMs into the school, and that speaks to the revolutionization of the educational system, bringing technical and vocational studies there, so that from 10th grade up, you know what you want to do. If you're going to do carpentry, you do carpentry. You do masonry, you do masonry. You come out of high school with some skills. The only operating polytechnic in the country is the Stella Maris Polytechnic. I think the polytechnic now should begin thinking in long term, working with schools into that effect, so that we can have, in America, I've seen that you have academic colleges. So people graduate from high school, but also remaining only 2 years, for example, to earn AA, all right? So they can be in 12th grade and also be doing college courses depending on how good they are. And at the end of the day, maybe by the time they graduate from high school, they only have a year or a year and a half to complete the AA program at polytechnic level. We can make sure that we can do all of that, but it starts with the commitment and the willpower on the part of our leaders.
So yes or no, should the new administration, the George Weah administration that is coming in right now, should they get rid of that whole Bridge Academy situation and reinvest the money in public education?
Very well.
Okay.
They should get rid of it.
Right. Up front on the Voice of America, my name is Jackson Vinganyi. We are with Laraamand Nyonton. We're talking about Liberia, some of the priorities as the new administration of George Weah takes over in Liberia. We're coming to the end of our show, and I think lastly, as we're coming to the end of our conversation, Laraamand, I really want to thank you for coming in. I know you drove very far to come here with us, and you know,
it was an exciting drive in a way.
What are some of the aspects of the Liberian civil war that are still lingering, that were never able to be dealt with during the Sirleaf administration, that you feel that George Weah should look at? Some of the wounds that need to be healed. Obviously, you know, many people died during the Civil War. The country still on a recovery. They was still recovering from that when Ebola hit. What are some of the things that are kind of lingering that need to be dealt with as we're coming to the end of this conversation?
Well, everywhere we've looked so far is a clarion call to the government, to this new administration, to implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. And I stand in support of that call. I think we need an unapologetic and unconditional implementation of the TRC report. And the reason why it is important is because it is not because it has engaged in terms of how Liberians here in the diaspora or in Liberia at the level of the media and civil society organization have engaged it in recent time. But this is not a new debate. The TRC report was submitted almost 10 years ago. Madam Sirleaf did not implement the TRC report, and we all have answers to that. It is because her very name was mentioned in the report. So she could not have implemented the TRC report. So we're calling on this government to do that, because in the report, and I'll just come back to you, in the report, recommendations that were made in that report, it's not to the government alone, it's also to the people of Liberia. That the people of Liberia should have a balanced faith in the potential of Liberia to rise above that period of darkness and to work exceedingly alongside the government to ensure that the TRC report is implemented. So if Madam Sirleaf did not implement a word of the 365 pages of that document, I think President Weah can do the just thing to do it. The second recommendation that was made was also to the international community, that there can be a space, right? They can have both a early warning as well as a conflict prevention mechanism into place, that they can work with Liberians, especially those in the diaspora that have grievances, that they can be able to express their grievances to these international bodies with the benchmark of peace and stability. So we are all willing to work along with this new government to implement the TRC. And at the center of the TRC report is to ensure that Section 2 of that report calls for, you know, they call the criminal tribunal to ensure that people who committed egregious domestic crime, people who violated international humanitarian laws, people who violated international human rights laws during the 14 years period are brought to justice. That's the only way the 250,000 people who lost their life, that's the only way survivors and victims of the civil conflict will receive justice. And that's the only way we can confront our better past.
Laraamand Nyonton, I think with that we'll just leave it right there. But thank you very much for joining us. And hopefully that when that report is implemented as per your recommendation, that we don't see a situation where they are dragging Alan Johnson's Sirleaf to court and others who are still in the leadership position, because again that's opening other wounds, and then another cycle starts. But we're running out of time. But you know, obviously justice has to be served. Everybody, you know, everybody who did something has to account for it. But I thank you very much for coming in today and talking to us, man.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Yeah.